Konnichiwa. Hello. Thank you all for coming to the Cardano Summit. We put this event on with just about 60 days worth of planning and about 45 days worth of execution once we started getting into the nuts and bolts of it. And we expected maybe to get a few thousand people if we were really lucky. Originally, before coronavirus hit, for the celebration launch of Shelley, I actually wanted to go to Kyoto and have a nice event there with the Japanese community because that's where Cardano began. And unfortunately, we weren't able to do that due to the quarantine and people's travel restrictions. But hopefully we were able to bring this event to as many people in Japan as possible. And in homage to them, I decided to wear my yukata. I actually have several of these that I picked up when I lived in Hawaii as well as when I lived in Osaka. This event was really about three things at its core. First, it was a celebration of the fact that we've ended the era of we will do, and it's the dawn of a new era in our project's history, the dawn of does. For a long time, people have kept saying Cardano will do this, Cardano will do that, Cardano shall have this capability. And now with the launch of Shelley, and in the next 120, 150 days, as we turn on all these capabilities, it's no longer the case that we will do something. It's the case that our platform does do something. You'll be able to run a small business and operate the chain. You'll be able to issue native assets. You'll be able to write smart contracts on par or better with any other system in the ecosystem. And we really wanted to make a bold exclamation point about how much of an achievement that was. This was not something that we decided to do lightly. We took it very seriously. Our scientists and engineers took it very seriously. And they put their heart and soul into that. Every aspect of the design of our protocols, every little thing, from where a button is in the GUI to basically how our architecture works, how big or how small, doesn't particularly matter. We cared about it. And we wanted to have an event to tell the world that it's finally here. And now people can use it, do things, love it, experience it, and build things with it. And this was really just a remarkable event from that perspective. But what was more important, and this is the second thing that I really wanted to emphasize in this event, is we wanted to show the world who we are. Who is Cardano? What are we all about? Every cryptocurrency has a community, and a lot of them are good communities. Bitcoin, for example, is where I started, and I was in that community for a long time. And in the early days, it was a great community, which I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun with. I fit in there, and a lot of other people did as well. So when we looked at the Cardano community, a lot of people are starting to pay attention to us and think about us for the first time, or the first time in a few years. And so we have this big spotlight on us. And so it was really important to me that we show our culture and we tell the world how we think, how we approach the world, how we communicate with each other, what our community is all about. So we invited people like Vint Cerf, for example, who's a blockchain skeptic, and he's the father of the internet. And we as a community were able to communicate with him, have a discussion, and you, our community, the Cardano community, were even able to ask him questions yourselves and get really good answers, really good feedback, great questions that we have to answer as a community, from how will we achieve scale, what are the killer use and utilities, how will we offer alternative systems to the identity problem, and so forth. And that was just a great experience. Similarly, we invited Stephen Wolfram, and he bridged two impossible things, the world of computation, the world of physics, with the world of distributed systems and smart contracts, and managed to talk about the theory of everything at the same time. And our community rose to the occasion and asked him great questions, thought-provoking ones, where he was able then to share even more information. Over 70 speakers from all walks of life, a former commissioner of the Securities Exchange Commission, Paul Atkins, leaders of countries, for example, the former Prime Minister of Georgia. We had great exchange operators like from Binance and Coinbase here, and many of our engineers and scientists and other people throughout our business had a chance to sit down and systematically show the things they cared about with their style. I saw Phil Kahn's presentation where he was talking about something that's traditionally as dry as formal methods, but found a way to lighten it up a bit by presenting with a lightsaber. And his daughter, his young daughter, had to help him disable the little sound thing in the lightsaber so it wouldn't make sound effects while he pointed at the screen with it. Meanwhile, he's teaching us about process calculus and how he and others invested thousands and thousands of hours throughout the last few years trying to go from pure science to something that an engineer can read, implement, and test and realize into code that now is actually in market and being used by people. We saw a wonderful panel with the original Haskell committee, many members of it, from John Hughes to Simon Peyton-Jones. And they had a chance to reflect on the fact that in 1985, they were just trying to solve a very simple problem, which was that the language they liked to use, Miranda, had suddenly gone a little crazy on intellectual property and became closed source, and they weren't able to use it in academic capacity. So they were trying to replace that with something a bit more reasonable, to the fact that they basically inspired the design of dozens of languages that are now commonly used in our industry, from features that are in Go and Java to Swift to things in JavaScript and Python. They've left a legacy that has inspired thousands of computer scientists and subsequently hundreds of thousands of engineers to write billions of lines of code with ideas that were so innocent and innocuous back in 1985. And we had a chance to pick their brains, thanks to Duncan Coutts' great moderation, and ask, what would you have done differently? We, as language designers, with Plutus and Marlowe and the many languages to come on Cardano, will one day be, hopefully, in the same position where we get to lament and regret the poor decisions that we made today and we had to somehow fix in the future because we're victims of our own success with millions of smart contract developers in our system. And it was really great to see that. We had panels that talked about enterprise, things like Hyperledger. What is our place and purpose in these large consortia that Fortune 500 companies use? And to that point, we also had a lot of great industry partners like Beef Chain showing real life examples of how they are actually trying to solve real problems that we're deeply concerned about across the world. The safety of our food, the security of our supply chain, the verification of claims. We all go to the supermarket, we see things labeled vegan or organic. We see things say no GMO. But how do you truly know as a consumer? And how do you know that that is actually honest? Solutions like this will give you that certainty and give you a great user experience, as simple as a QR code that you can scan with your phone, thanks to the hard work that these entrepreneurs are doing as they slowly integrate these systems, not only to the United States supply chain, but hopefully into supply chains throughout the world, throughout Africa, throughout Mongolia. And we can actually get much better markets and less people have to die of adulterated food or experience problems as a consequence of that. So it's truly remarkable to see the breadth and depth of conversation. We saw things like Atlas. You see, we need to kind of build a new type of explorer because it's no longer sufficient just to visualize transactions. It's no longer sufficient to just talk about where did the money go. You also have to have a discussion about exchanges, stake pool operators, dApps. You have to have discussions about assets issued on the system. And all of these have unique visualization and data presentation requirements about them, data analytic requirements about them, above and beyond the explorers of the first and second generations. And that's going to become increasingly more important, especially as we move into the world of on-chain governance. In fact, that's such an important track that we have even created a whole bunch of software specifically for it. The dawn of Voltaire, an unexpected announcement of our summit. Voltaire is going to enable you, the entire Cardano community, to start voting, to start funding, to have opinions about where we should go and what we should do. Who has enough merit to deserve a chance from the community to go and build something for the community and eventually for the world as a whole? What will create the greatest value for our ecosystem? What will produce the greatest use and utility for our system? These are difficult questions, and they're questions that we all have to answer together. And the dawn of Voltaire means that we can start doing that together. As uncertain as it may be, and as shaky as it can be, and frustrating as it can be at times, we as a community showed the world that we are capable of disagreeing without being disagreeable. We are capable of entertaining other opinions, even ones we don't hold, and still be friendly. That's something that's unique in our space. We never once succumbed to the temptations of maximalism. We never once decided to go ahead and descend into the easy path of just simply straw manning the people we disagree with. Rather, we face them head on. There's no greater example of that than what we did with the peer review process. We keep saying it because it is so incredibly meaningful. It's a commitment to accepting criticism. It's a commitment to acknowledging humility and our own imperfections. The reality is, despite how hard we've worked over the last 5 years, there are flaws, mistakes, and issues with the things that we've done because we're human. And the power of this approach is that we are inviting people to show that to us, not to criticize us, but rather to help us fix them and get to the next level. And in the process of doing that, they become our partners as we try to get better and better protocols. You know, I often think of John Gartner's book, The Idea Factory. It was written about Bell Labs, and it talked about great environments that inspire the best and brightest amongst us to have the ability to rise, to have the ability to do wonderful things. And I think the line that stuck with me the most is to say something like, what we have desired to achieve is to create a place where quiet brilliance can get loud. And I really believe that we've done that. A lot of people who are in their own way truly exceptional have been ignored, trivialized, or just simply set aside and told, well, we'll get around to talking to you, and they never actually do. The magic of Cardano is the way that we collaborate, the culture that we have fostered here, is that we have taken those quiet, brilliant people, wherever they might live. Doesn't matter the geography, doesn't matter where they're born, who they're born to, doesn't matter the gender, the race. None of that really truly matters. And we've allowed them to get as loud as they want, and we can still hear them, we can still listen and still find value in the things that they do. And you can truly see that by just the sheer quality, volume, and execution of ideas in our ecosystem. There are many great projects throughout the cryptocurrency space. There are the Algorands and the Tezoses and the Ripples and the Ethereums and so forth. And usually the case that they excel in a collection of things, one or two, perhaps three or four, and that's what they're known for. When we looked at the Tezos, we say that's the great governance chain. When we look to Ripple, we say, though, those are the guys who do the Internet of Value and they bring the banks in. Ethereum, that's the smart contract chain. The challenge for us in the Cardano ecosystem is that we are the first chain that truly aspires to be a third generation cryptocurrency, which means that we must find balance and harmony amongst many competing trade-offs and demands and do a lot more than just one thing. We need to talk to other chains. We need to scale to billions of users. We need to have on-chain governance. We need to have the ability to support many different computational models, not just one, and to work with rich off-chain experiences. And despite the fact that we have so many vast business requirements and technical requirements, we must also always keep the soul of what we've established, the evidence-based approach, the scientific approach. And in this, we have no equal. We have shown to the world that despite the fact that we have chosen the hardest of roads and the most work to do, that we have made significant and meaningful progress, and we did so in a way that kept a smile on our face. And we did so in a way where we didn't need to bring people down or tell everybody how great we are. Rather, we just did the work and we moved on and did even more work. And we opened our arms and said, whoever wants to come, whoever wants to work with us, we'll be there to work with them. So that's what I'm most proud of. And that was the second thing that I really wanted to show at this summit, that there exists a community in the cryptocurrency space. Regardless of where you start, you can be an industry veteran or someone totally new. You can be a skeptic or you can be an evangelist. There exists a community that will always have a place for you. And if you wish to commit some time to working with us, we'll commit some time and perhaps even money to work with you. And this community has more tools than any other to do so. We announced things like the C Fund, where it wasn't good enough to have flowery words and tell everybody that we're here. We have to actually put money on the table because people need funding. So my company committed $10 million, and Waves Financial, a wonderful fund, will work with us to match another $10 million and create a very large treasury chest that allows us to be able to bridge that DeFi and dApp gap and get some wonderful experiences and utility into our ecosystem in a very short period of time. We have the benefit of hindsight. We have the benefit of being the Google coming after the Yahoo. We have the benefit of being the Netscape coming after the Mosaic. The first wave always is covered in scars and design mistakes and usually ends up disassociating over time. There's no coincidence that MySpace happens to no longer be around, yet Facebook is still here. So in that short window where we have that benefit, we can leapfrog the competition if the experiences are sufficiently good and we leverage the unique capabilities of our platform, which truly are above the rest. And so the purpose of this fund is to make sure that we strike while the iron is hot, and we're able to do that quickly. But no amount of wisdom or capabilities on our side will allow us to be wiser than the community as a whole. And as a consequence, we have the DC fund. As I've mentioned before, you, the community, now get to decide funding priorities. And these priorities do not have to be profit-oriented. They can be as simple as sponsoring an event to as complicated as a long arc research agenda to do high risk, high return research, which may never end up in the protocol. Regardless of where it sits, the priorities and the authorization of that rest within your hands. And you as a community now get to have that conversation starting in July with our partner Submittable. And in the coming months, more and more of those capabilities will turn on. And eventually, every aspect of the governance of our ecosystem, from the custodians to the upgrading of the protocol itself, will be in the hands of perhaps the most resilient and innovative voting system ever deployed at any scale like this. That's a major accomplishment in its own right. And the fact that that's paired with an amazing smart contract system, it's paired with a best-in-class consensus protocol and the ability to scale to millions of people and eventually billions as these protocols evolve and as those small business operators evolve, become more plentiful and larger. That's truly a great thought to think that we are starting to make meaningful progress in pushing power to the edges. The final point of this conference was to convey that this by no means is an end. Rather, it's just a new beginning. We are closing out the legacy of the last 5 years, and we are entering into a new legacy, which gives us new opportunities. The fact that we now have this success, these foundations, this community, means that we are now in a position to tackle some of the greatest problems in computer science and some of the greatest business problems and governance problems of the 21st century. As much frustration as people feel, as much as people like to be cynical and complain, I have always been an optimist. I have always believed that we can fix problems. We can achieve great things if only we find the way to work together. We have shown the space that we can deliver, and we've shown the space that we have a culture that deserves to win. We have a culture that deserves to have a chance to do things differently, to change the way the game needs to be played. Every day we gain more people in our Telegrams and our Reddit, on Twitter, more downloads of Daedalus, more downloads of Yoroi. Every day we get a more diverse group of actors and more attention and focus. And despite the fact that we continue to grow, we never change or waver which means that we continue getting more capabilities to solve these hard problems. The hard problems of how do we grow to millions and billions and keep our principles, keep properties like inclusive accountability, which, by the way, Vint Cerf did mention in his panel. What does privacy mean to us? Products like Prism give us a huge amount of capabilities in the identity space and are invaluable with regulated products like security tokens, and invaluable when we talk about topics like compliance. Equally so, if used correctly, they can also fundamentally change the way that identity works to put you in charge of your own identity and give you far greater degrees of privacy and give you far greater dominion over your personal data in every aspect, whether that be signing a contract or something as complicated and regulated as medical data. That's a beautiful thing, but it's only ever going to be realized if our community realizes it and embeds it and builds it into their products. And our community evangelizes the use of this system at both the government and the private level. And the burden is now not only on our shoulders, the IOHKs of the world, the Emergos of the world, the foundations of the world, but also your shoulders as entrepreneurs and evangelists for this thought, this way of life, to propagate these things. We'll work with you. In many cases, we'll fund you. In many cases, the community will fund you. But nonetheless, the road ahead will be hard. And there's a lot to do, and there's a lot more to build. Yet, regardless if we look at Atala, Prism, we look at Atlas, we look at Adrestia, or any of the other products that we have been building for these many years and will continue to develop and build up, what gives me the most hope is that we can do things no one else has seemingly done before, faster than anyone else has done before. We often get criticized as a project for how slow we've been. And the reality is we're actually the fastest cryptocurrency in a certain respect because we're the only one playing the game that we happen to be. The goal of this project was never to transcend Bitcoin and somehow replace it. The goal of this project was never to become the next Ethereum. The goal of this project was to force a fundamental reevaluation of how civilization should work and ask ourselves, as we exit the 21st century, did we do better than the way the world worked when we entered? There is no magic that guarantees that to be the case. The Roman Empire collapses and enter the Dark Ages, and it took quite a bit of time for us to get to the Enlightenment. And despite the Enlightenment, we worked our way up to the horrors of totalitarianism and communism in the 20th century. And many horrible things had to be done and endured for us to get out of that. Each generation has a unique challenge, and technology is neutral. Science is neutral. It gives us tools and capabilities, but it does not give us wisdom, and it does not give us certainty of where to go. And along that token, the things that we are building here must have wisdom for them to be good. So the last point is the point of the future of where are we to go? What are we to do? How should this technology be used? And the reality is as much as your hands as it is mine, and increasingly more so. And as a consequence, we have to work diligently to ensure that the things that we do are used in ways that benefit all of us, are used in ways that make the world a better place. This is why my company spends so much time amongst the poorest in the world and spends so much time trying to figure out how that we can all rise together. I never signed up to have a job where I go work with a Fortune 500 company and I make them 5% better, 10% better, build a product where we have decent margins, get a nice executive bonus at the end of the year, and then pat ourselves on the back about how we're doing a good job. The definition of success for my company has always been, have we left the world in a better place than when we found it? And we have to acknowledge the fact that the things that we build and do carry consequences behind them. So we spend just as much time as we do on evidence-based software and peer-reviewed research and community evangelism and so forth, also imagining the future. And now the time has come for you, the community, to start spending that time as well. We as a community have to keep the culture that has gotten us here and evolve and grow to a point where our culture can allow us to transform other communities and eventually companies and governments altogether. I firmly believe we can accomplish this, and I firmly believe that this will be the moment where humanity did something a little different. We didn't descend into the temptations of division and chaos, but rather we ascended to a new way of doing things where we value the dignity of all humanity. And that's really the last point of this summit. We need to look to the future. And now that we are the platform that does instead of will do, we need to use that does with great wisdom. And I have every reason to believe that each and every one of you is capable of doing that. I will always be an optimist. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for spending time with us. This actually wasn't as hard to put on as you'd think, because it's just a snapshot of who we are. So we didn't have to tell anybody to do anything special. We just told them to show up and be themselves and give people a glimpse into that beautiful environment we've created. And as a consequence, we can do this again. And the next time we do this, instead of having just 10,000 people, perhaps we can surprise everybody and have 100,000. And then the next time, perhaps we can have 1,000,000. There's really no limit. It'll keep scaling. And as a final note, to the people of Japan, arigato. Thank you so much for all your trust, faith, and love that you've had for us since the very beginning. I will never forget it. You changed my life, and I hope that I can change yours, or already have. Thank you.